The crystal spires of Xylos sang softly as another energy storm swept across the small moon's surface. Trapped within their harmonious vibrations were whispers of danger and beauty intertwined, much like Lyra herself. She moved with practiced caution through the labyrinthine crystalline tunnels she called home, her slender form casting elongated shadows against the phosphorescent walls. Lyra's body was outlined by a nimbus of energy, today a slow-pulsing blue tinged with violet at its edges, reflecting her quiet melancholy. The field ebbed and flowed with her breathing, occasional ripples disturbing its surface when her thoughts wandered to uncomfortable places. She had long ago stopped flinching when the energy field sparked unexpectedly. Such was her constant companion, both shield and prison. The living quarters she had carved into the crystalline moon over many cycles were beautiful in their austere simplicity. Polished crystal surfaces refracted the ambient light from her own energy field, creating dancing patterns across the ceiling. Shelves held various specimens of local crystal fauna, dormant now, without their native energy sources and tools she had fashioned for survival. Everything had its place, organized with the precision of someone who had only their own systems to maintain over years of solitude. Her routine was unchanging, reinforcing the cave entrances against the increasingly violent energy storms, gathering luminescent resources from the safer inner chambers, monitoring the energy patterns that served as her calendar and weather prediction system. Today's readings suggested an unusually strong convergence of energy in the upper atmosphere. Lyra adjusted her protective shielding around the cave entrance, adding an extra layer of crystalline lattice to deflect the worst of it. A small Siliphana creature, something like a crystalline lizard with multiple faceted eyes, skittered away as she approached, sensing the fluctuations in her field before she even rounded the corner. Lyra sighed, watching it disappear into a crevice. Even the native life forms knew to avoid her. "Just like home," she murmured to the empty air, her voice creating rippling harmonics in the crystals around her. The thought of home, the Lumina colonies with their grand floating cities of crystal and light, brought a sudden spike of electricity crackling through her field. She quickly steadied her breathing, calming the dangerous surge before it could damage the delicate surroundings. It had been 12 cycles since the incident. 12 cycles since she'd seen another sentient being. Sometimes she could almost convince herself she preferred it this way. No expectations, no fear in others' eyes, no need to maintain constant vigilance over her emotional state. Almost. The memory threatened to surface again, faces contorted in terror, the catastrophic energy cascade she had triggered during what should have been a simple coming-of-age ceremony, the council's verdict. She pushed it down, focusing instead on the immediate task of checking her energy collectors. That's when she heard it, a faint signal cutting through the background radiation, distinctive and artificial. Lyra froze, listening intently as her field shimmered with sudden alertness, sending sparks of golden light dancing across the crystal surfaces around her. The signal came again, stronger this time. A distress beacon, though of a configuration she didn't recognize. Non-luminant technology. Cautiously, she made her way to a natural observation point, a high crystalline outcropping that provided a view of the moon's broken landscape. The churning energy storms had temporarily cleared, revealing the gas giant Xylos orbited hanging huge and ominous in the dark sky, its swirling clouds of amber and violet creating a backdrop for the unfolding drama. A small cargo vessel was fighting a losing battle with the moon's erratic gravitational field and energy discharges. Even from this distance, Lyra could see the craft was damaged, venting atmosphere and trailing debris as it made a desperate, controlled descent toward the surface. The pilot was skilled, adjusting course to avoid the worst of the crystal formations, but the ship was clearly failing. Lyra watched, transfixed, as the vessel disappeared behind a jagged crystal ridge not far from her sanctuary. The impact sent tremors through the ground, and a plume of crystalline dust rose into the thin atmosphere. She should ignore it. Whatever, whoever, was aboard that ship wasn't her concern. The Lumina Council had been clear. Her exile was absolute. Contact with any sentient species was forbidden, both for her safety and theirs. Her presence was a liability, her unstable energy field a constant danger. That was the point of sending her to this abandoned mining outpost on a volatile, resource-depleted moon. Yet something pulled at her, curiosity, perhaps, or a loneliness so deep it had become part of her being. Before she had fully decided, Lyra was gathering emergency supplies and protective gear. Just to observe, she told herself. Just to make sure they weren't a threat. Her energy field flickered anxiously as she navigated the treacherous terrain, separating her caves from the crash site, its usual blue-violet sheen now shot through with nervous amber. Sharp crystal formations jutted at odd angles, some vibrating dangerously with residual energy from the recent storm. Lyra moved with the grace of long practice, knowing which formations to avoid and which pathways would hold stable. The crash had created a new landscape, shattered crystal spires, molten patches of silicate, and the broken hull of the ship partially embedded in the ground. The vessel was small, clearly designed for speed and maneuverability rather than cargo capacity. Wanderer was emblazoned on its side in a script Lyra vaguely recognized from old data archives, Standard Galactic, the trade language of the human-dominated sectors. Movement caught her eye, a figure extracting itself from the wreckage, dragging what appeared to be equipment cases clear of the smoking hull. Lyra crouched lower behind her crystal vantage point, her field dimming instinctively, though she knew it couldn't be completely hidden. The figure, humanoid, wearing a damaged environmental suit, paused and looked directly toward her hiding place. Lyra held her breath. Had they seen her, or just sensed the energy disturbance her presence created? "Hello." The voice came through some kind of external speaker, distorted but understandable. "I know someone's there. I could use some help if you're offering." The directness startled her. No one had spoken to her in so long that the simple greeting felt alien. Her field spiked with surprise, sending out a pulse that shattered a small crystal formation nearby. The sound gave away her position completely. There was nothing for it now. Slowly, Lyra stood, allowing herself to be seen, her energy field a swirling mix of caution and curiosity. The human, for it was clearly a human inside that suit, took a step back, obviously surprised by her appearance, but didn't flee. Instead, after a moment's hesitation, they removed their damaged helmet. A man's face emerged, tan skin, features drawn with exhaustion and stress, dark hair matted with sweat. His eyes widened to the sight of her luminescent skin and the visible energy field that surrounded her like a living aurora, but his expression registered curiosity rather than terror. "Well," he said after a moment, a small, tired smile crossing his face. "You're definitely not the rescue party I was expecting." Lyra remained perfectly still, uncertain how to respond. Her entire body was tense, waiting for the fear to register in his eyes, for the panic that inevitably followed when others witnessed the unstable nature of her energy field. Instead, the human carefully set down his helmet and raised empty hands in what she recognized as a universal gesture of peaceful intent. "My name is Jian. My ship, the Wanderer, has seen better days, as you can probably tell. Navigation systems are fried, Comm Array is damaged beyond my ability to repair, and life support is running on auxiliary power that'll last maybe another 30 standard hours." He gestured at the broken landscape around them. "I don't suppose you know a good mechanic in the neighborhood? Or at least somewhere safe to wait out these energy storms?" The casual attempt at humor was so unexpected that Lyra's field flickered with something almost like amusement, ripples of lighter blue chasing through the anxious amber. The human, Jian, noticed the change, his eyes tracking the movement with interest rather than apprehension. "You understand me," he said. It wasn't a question. Lyra nodded once, then found her voice rusty from disuse. "This moon is not safe." Her accent was strange even to her own ears, the harmonics of luminant speech interfering with the standard galactic syllables. "More storms coming. Stronger. Jin glanced at the darkening sky where energy discharges were already beginning to fork between clouds. Yeah, I got that impression during my unplanned landing. He looked back at her. But you survive here. How? Caves, Lyra said simply, gesturing toward the network of crystalline tunnels from which she had emerged. Protected. Mostly. Another energy tendril lashed across the sky, closer this time, sending a cascade of responsive vibrations through the crystal formations around them. Jin winced as a sharp crack split the air. I need to salvage what I can before this gets worse, he said, turning back to the damaged ship. Any chance those caves of yours have room for a temporary guest? Lyra's field sparked with alarm, a reaction she couldn't hide. Take a stranger to her sanctuary? Risk proximity when her control was already tenuous from this unexpected encounter? I'm dangerous, she said flatly. Jin paused in the act of reaching for one of the equipment cases, his expression quizzical. More dangerous than staying out here? He gestured to the increasingly violent sky and the sharp crystal shards now beginning to resonate around them. He had a point. Without shelter, the human would not survive the night. And despite years of isolation, Lyra found she could not simply leave him to die. Not when she had the means to help. You must follow exactly, she said finally. Don't touch crystals. Don't touch me. She gestured to her energy field, which was now fluctuating between concern and resignation. Jin nodded, gathering what appeared to be the most important of his salvaged equipment. Lead the way. I promise to be a model house guest. The journey back to her cave system was tense. Lyra moved with greater caution than usual, acutely aware of the human following several paces behind. His breathing sounded labored, possibly from injury, possibly from the thin atmosphere not quite matched to human requirements. Either way, they needed to reach shelter before his condition worsened or the storm intensified. A particularly violent energy discharge struck nearby, causing a massive crystal formation to shatter. Jin barely avoided the spray of razor-sharp shards, one grazing his arm through the torn environmental suit. He hissed in pain, but kept moving. Almost there, Lyra called back, her field pulsing with urgency. They rounded a final bend to reveal the reinforced entrance to her dwelling, carved into the living crystal and fortified with interlocking lattices of energy-dampening materials. Inside, the relative quiet was almost disorienting after the mounting chaos outside. Lyra activated the final barrier shield, watched it shimmer into place with a soft hum, then turned to face her unexpected guest. Jin stood just inside the entrance, taking in his surroundings with obvious wonder. The crystalline chambers captured and refracted the light from Lyra's energy field, creating a spectacle of color and shadow. Equipment of mixed origins, some clearly luminen, some salvaged from other sources, lined the walls. Deeper passages led off in several directions, their surfaces inscribed with what appeared to be energy monitoring glyphs. This is, he started, then seemed at a loss for words. Not what I was expecting. Lyra moved to a storage area, carefully maintaining distance between them. What were you expecting? Jin shrugged, then winced at the movement. Honestly, a basic survival shelter. Not whatever this is. It's like a cross between a scientific outpost and a crystal cathedral. It is home, Lyra said simply, removing several containers from the storage unit. She turned to observe him more carefully, noting the way he favored his left side and the slow seepage of blood along his right arm where the crystal had cut him. You're injured. Jin glanced down as if just remembering the wound. It's not serious, though I wouldn't say no to some disinfectant if you have it. Lyra hesitated, then retrieved a small vial of luminescent gel from her medical supplies. This will help. But, she paused, uncertain how to explain. But what? Jin asked, already beginning to remove the torn section of his environmental suit to better access the wound. It is made for my biology, she explained. It may feel strange, but it will prevent infection and speed healing. Jin considered this, then nodded. At this point, I'll take strange over gangrenous. How do I apply it? I will show. Lyra approached cautiously, her field pulled in as tightly to her body as she could manage. She uncapped the vial and demonstrated a spreading motion in the air. Thin layer only. Jian took the vial, his fingers carefully avoiding contact with hers. He applied the gel as instructed, his expression shifting from wariness to surprise as the substance began to glow softly against his skin. Wow, it's warm, and sort of humming. He looked up at her with genuine curiosity. What is it? Living crystal extract with energy harmonic properties, Lyra explained, stepping back to a safer distance. It resonates with biological energy fields to accelerate cellular regeneration. Handy, Jian commented, examining the glowing wound with obvious fascination. So, do you have a name? Or should I just call you Mysterious Glowing Cave Dweller? The unexpected humor caught her off guard again. Lyra, she replied after a moment. My designation is Lyranath Varin, but Lyra is sufficient. Lyra, he repeated, testing the name. Thank you for not leaving me out there, Lyra. I am genuinely grateful. The sincerity in his voice caused a ripple of unfamiliar warmth through her energy field, a soft golden hue that hadn't manifested in years. She quickly suppressed it, alarmed by the easy response her field had to this stranger's presence. You should rest, she said abruptly, indicating a recessed area that contained what might generously be called a sleeping platform. Storm will last hours, perhaps longer. Jian nodded, clearly exhausted but still watching her with that same curious, unafraid expression. What about you? Do you sleep? Yes, Lyra answered, moving toward another chamber. But differently. I will be nearby if... Emergency. She retreated to her private chamber, needing space to process this unexpected development. Once alone, she allowed her field to expand slightly, releasing some of the tension of keeping it tightly controlled. The energy crackled around her, reflecting her conflicted emotions, concern, curiosity, and an alarming thread of something like hope. It had been so long since she had spoken to anyone, so long since anyone had looked at her without fear. She knew better than to trust this tentative connection. It would only end as it always did, in fear and rejection once the human understood the true nature of her condition. And yet, as she settled into her regeneration cycle, Lyra found herself wondering what questions the human would ask when he awoke, and what it might be like to have a conversation that lasted more than a few cautious exchanges. The storm raged outside, but for the first time in many cycles, Lyra's isolation felt slightly less absolute. Jian awoke to the soft luminescence of crystal formations and the distant, muted rumble of the ongoing storm. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then the events of his crash landing and rescue flooded back. He sat up carefully, noting with surprise that the pain in his side had diminished considerably and the cut on his arm was already sealing beneath the strange glowing gel. Good. It works on your physiology. Lyra's voice came from the entrance to the chamber. She stood there, her energy field a calm blue-green, observing him with evident scientific interest. Jian stretched cautiously. Whatever it is, it's effective. Thank you. He looked around. How long was I out? 1 full cycle of the gas giant, Lyra replied, moving into the room with a container of what appeared to be food. Approximately 14 standard hours. 14 hours? Jian was startled. I never sleep that long. The healing gel induces restorative stasis, Lyra explained, setting the container within his reach, but maintaining her careful distance. Your body needed repair. Jian examined the contents of the container. Crystalline formations that somewhat resembled fruit, glowing faintly with inner light. Is this safe for me to eat? Lyra's field rippled with what might have been amusement. I analyzed your biological patterns while you slept. These contain nutrients compatible with your system. She hesitated, then added, I have limited supplies suited to human consumption. These were in emergency stores. You were expecting human visitors? Jian asked, cautiously sampling one of the crystal fruits. It dissolved on his tongue with a surprising burst of sweetness and energy. No, Lyra admitted. But Xylos was once a mining outpost. Prepared for contingencies. Jian nodded, continuing to eat as he studied his unusual host. In the better light, he could see that her appearance was even more remarkable than he'd first realized. Her physical form was humanoid, but clearly alien. Tall and slender with luminescent skin that seemed to shift subtly between translucence and opacity. Intricate patterns flowed across her surface, sometimes appearing as script or symbols, sometimes as pure energy currents. Her features were delicate but strange, with eyes that held no discernible pupil, only swirling depths of light that changed color with her energy field. "The way your energy field changes colors," he said, gesturing with the crystal fruit. "Is that voluntary?" Lyra tensed visibly, her field constricting tighter around her body. "No, it is emotional resonance. Involuntary." She turned away slightly. "It is why I am here. Alone." Jian set down the half-eaten fruit, sensing he'd touched on something significant. "What do you mean?" For a long moment, Lyra was silent, her field flickering with conflicting patterns. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but precise. "My energy field is unstable, unpredictable. The Lumina Council determined I could not safely reside among others. They exiled you because of something you can't control." Jian couldn't keep the indignation from his voice. Lyra's field spiked with a flash of painful memory, sharp red streaks cutting through the blue. "It was necessary. There was an incident during my initiation ceremony. My field destabilized under stress. 3 elders were critically injured. A section of the floating city was destroyed." She looked down at her hands, which shimmered with suppressed energy. "It was deemed safer for all if I remained isolated until control could be achieved." "And has it been achieved, I mean?" Lyra's field darkened. "No, not fully. I can maintain basic stabilization, but under duress." She gestured to a section of the cave wall where crystalline formations had clearly been melted and reformed. "The consequences remain unpredictable." Jian absorbed this information thoughtfully. "So that's why you warned me not to touch you." "Yes. Direct contact can trigger energy transfer. Dangerous for non-luminance." Jian nodded, then changed the subject, sensing her discomfort. "This storm doesn't seem to be letting up. Any idea how long until it passes?" Lyra seemed grateful for the shift in focus. "Current patterns suggest at least another full cycle. These convergent storms have been increasing in frequency and duration." She hesitated, then added, "Your vessel. It is beyond repair." Jian ran a hand through his hair, grimacing. "The main systems are fried. Navigation, propulsion, long-range communications, all gone. I salvaged the emergency beacon, but it doesn't have the range to reach beyond this system." He looked up at her. "I don't suppose you have a transmitter powerful enough to cut through these energy storms?" "No," Lyra admitted. "But—" She paused, considering something. "There may be a solution. The crystal formations on Xylos have unique resonance properties. With the right configuration, they can amplify and focus energy signals." Jian straightened with interest. "Like a natural signal booster?" "Yes, but we would need a specific type of resonance crystal. They form only in the deeper cave networks, where energy convergence is strongest. And those deeper caves, I'm guessing they're not exactly a leisurely stroll away." Lyra's field flickered with what might have been grim humor. "They are challenging to access, unstable, sometimes inhabited by silicon-based predators attracted to energy sources." Jin's eyebrows rose. "Like the energy source you're constantly generating?" "Precisely why I avoid those sections," Lyra confirmed. "But with your technical knowledge and my understanding of the cave structure, we might be able to create a beacon powerful enough to punch through the interference," Jian finished, already mentally calculating what he would need. "It's worth a shot. Better than waiting for my supplies to run out or your next visitor to show up, which, judging by your reaction to me, might be a while." Lyra's field rippled with acknowledgement of the gentle tease. "The journey would not be safe. Neither is staying here indefinitely," Jian countered. He stood, testing his recovered strength. "When can we leave?" After the storm passes, Lyra said, moving toward what appeared to be a monitoring station. We should prepare. You will need better protection. She gestured to his damaged environmental suit. I have materials that can be adapted. The next hours were spent in careful preparation. Jian found himself impressed by Lyra's resourcefulness and knowledge. She modified a spare environmental liner to provide him with better protection against the cave system's unpredictable energy discharges, incorporating crystalline fibers that would help disperse harmful radiation. Meanwhile, he worked on reconfiguring his damaged emergency beacon to interface with the resonance crystals they hoped to find. The technical challenge helped distract him from his predicament, and he found himself explaining his modifications to Lyra, who listened with evident interest, occasionally offering insights that suggested a deep understanding of energy mechanics. You know a lot about signal technology for someone living alone in a cave, he observed as they finished the preparations. Lyra's field shimmered with something like pride. Before the incident, I was training in advanced energy manipulation. Communications was a specialty. What a coincidence, Jin said, sealing the modified beacon housing. Or maybe not. The universe has a strange way of putting the right people in the wrong places sometimes. Lyra tilted her head, considering this. Is that a human philosophy? Just personal experience? Jin replied with a small smile. Speaking of which, I should probably mention that if this beacon works, the people who respond might not be entirely friendly toward me. Lyra's field sharpened with alertness. Explain. Jin sighed, setting down his tools. The short version? I used to work for a corporation called Technocorp. They're in weapons development, among other things. I was on their R&D team until I discovered they were weaponizing some technology one developed, technology that was supposed to be for medical applications. His expression hardened. When I objected, they made it clear I had two choices: continue the work or face consequences. So I made a third choice. I took key research data and ran. Been working as an independent cargo hauler ever since, staying off their radar. They pursue you still? Oh, definitely. The data I took proves they knowingly violated about 15 major treaties. Last I heard, they had bounty hunters looking for me. In 3 sectors. He shrugged. Hence my less-than-legal route through this system, which wasn't supposed to include crash landing on a crystal moon during an energy storm. Lyra absorbed this, her field shifting through patterns of concern and calculation. If your beacon activates, they may detect it. It's possible, Jin admitted, though this system is pretty remote. More likely we'll attract independent salvagers or a patrol from one of the outer colonies. I'm just saying, we should be prepared for complications. Lyra's field settled into a determined blue. Then we will need to be very careful about the beacon's configuration. And quick. The storm finally abated late in the next cycle, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. The crystal landscape had been altered by the energy discharges. New formations had grown where lightning struck repeatedly, while others had shattered, creating fields of glittering debris. Lyra led the way, moving with the assured grace of someone intimately familiar with the treacherous terrain. Jian followed carefully, his modified environment suit providing better protection, but still requiring caution around the more unstable crystal formations. These crystals, he said after they had been walking for some time, they almost seem alive, the way they grow and respond to energy. Lyra glanced back, her field a thoughtful blue-green. They exist in a state between organic and inorganic. They absorb, store, and transmit energy. In sufficient concentrations, they develop primitive response systems. Like the crystal lizards I saw near your cave? Yes. Silifauna are the simplest manifestations. In the deepest caverns, more complex forms evolve. She paused at a junction of crystal formations, seeming to sense something. This way, the resonance is stronger. They descended through increasingly complex and beautiful crystal structures. Some chambers were vast, with spiraling formations that caught and amplified the light from Lyra's energy field, creating spectacular displays of color and pattern. Other passages narrowed to tight squeezes that required careful navigation to avoid touching the more volatile crystal growths. Throughout their journey, Jin noticed how the environment responded to Lyra's presence. Crystals humming in harmony with her field, some growing visibly brighter as she passed. It was as if the entire moon recognized her as kin, a fellow energy being. "It's beautiful," he said softly as they entered a particularly stunning chamber where crystal formations had grown into what resembled a frozen waterfall of light. "Do you ever get used to it?" Lyra paused, her field rippling with an emotion Jin couldn't identify. "I had stopped seeing it," she admitted. "When you were alone for so long, even beauty becomes just environment." They continued deeper, the passages now showing signs of past disturbance. Tool marks on some walls suggested this area had once been part of the mining operations. "We must be careful here," Lyra warned, her voice lowered. "The old mining tunnels are unstable, and there are creatures that have adapted to feed on the energy residue left by the equipment." As if summoned by her warning, a soft scraping sound echoed from a side passage. Lyra immediately pulled her energy field tighter, dimming its brightness. Jin froze, hand moving instinctively to a multi-purpose tool at his belt. A crystalline form scuttled into view. Larger than the lizard-like creatures Jin had seen earlier, this resembled something between a crab and a spider, with multiple limbs ending in sharp crystal points and a cluster of faceted sensors that functioned as eyes. It paused, orienting those sensors toward them, clearly detecting Lyra's energy field despite her attempts to subdue it. "Don't move," Lyra whispered. "It's hunting by energy signature." The creature took a step closer, its crystal limbs creating soft chiming sounds against the floor. It was clearly interested in Lyra's energy field, probably seeing it as a potential food source. "Can you distract it?" Jin murmured. "Create an energy pulse away from us." Lyra's field flickered with tension. "Risky. Might attract others. Or cause tunnel collapse." The creature edged closer, its crystalline body beginning to resonate in harmony with Lyra's field, attempting to draw energy from her. Jin made a quick decision. From his pack, he extracted a small emergency flare, modified with the crystal technology Lyra had provided. With a swift movement, he activated it and tossed it down a side passage, away from their intended route. The flare erupted in a burst of energy that mimicked Lyra's field frequency. The creature immediately lost interest in them, scuttling rapidly after the more intense energy source. "Quick thinking," Lyra acknowledged, her field showing impressed blue-gold ripples. "But we should move quickly. That will attract attention." They hurried forward, the passages now descending more steeply. The crystal formations changed character. Larger, more complex structures that pulsed with inner light even without Lyra's presence to activate them. The air felt charged, as if they were moving through an electrical field. "We're close," Lyra said, her voice hushed with anticipation or anxiety, perhaps both. The resonance crystals form in chambers where multiple energy currents converge. They emerged into a vast cavern that took Jin's breath away. The ceiling soared hundreds of meters overhead, covered in massive crystal formations that hung like frozen lightning bolts. The floor was a landscape of crystal pools and islands, each glowing with its own inner light. At the center, where several channels of energy visibly flowed together, a cluster of perfect octahedral crystals grew, each one pulsing with a deep, rich light that seemed to call to Lyra's own energy field. "Those are what we need," she said, pointing to the central formation. "But extracting them is dangerous. The energy concentration is volatile." Jin scanned the cavern with both his eyes and the modified scanner he'd salvaged from the ship. "These readings are off the charts. No wonder the miners abandoned this place. It would be like trying to drill in the middle of a perpetual lightning storm." "Precisely," Lyra agreed. "We need to approach carefully. The crystals must be disengaged from the energy flow before removal, or they will shatter, possibly explosively." They made their way forward, picking a path across the crystalline landscape. Jin noticed that Lyra was struggling more than usual to contain her energy field. The ambient energy of the cavern seemed to be amplifying her own emissions, causing ripples and flares that were clearly difficult for her to control. "Are you all right?" he asked, pausing on a relatively stable platform. Lyra's field pulsed with effort. "The convergence. It resonates with my own patterns. Makes control more difficult." She took a steadying breath. "I can manage, but we must be quick." They reached the central crystal formation, a structure of breathtaking complexity and beauty. The resonance crystals they sought were embedded at its heart, each one a perfect geometric form that seemed to contain galaxies of light within its facets. "I need to disrupt the energy flow temporarily," Lyra explained, her field now fluctuating visibly as she fought for control. "When I do, you must extract the crystal quickly using the insulated tools I provided. We will have perhaps 10 seconds before the flow reestablishes." Jin positioned himself with the specialized extraction tools, nodding his readiness. "On your signal." Lyra closed her eyes, concentrating intensely. Her energy field expanded slowly, deliberately, reaching out to intersect with the flowing energy patterns of the cavern. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a visible ripple, she manipulated her field to create a counter-frequency that temporarily disrupted the energy flow to the central crystal. "Now," she called, her voice strained with effort. Jin moved quickly, using the insulated tools to carefully extract one of the resonance crystals from its matrix. The moment it detached, he secured it in the containment unit they had prepared, designed to maintain the crystal's properties while preventing energy leakage. "Got it," he announced, stepping back just as Lyra released her control, allowing the energy flow to resume its normal pattern. The effort had clearly cost her. Lyra's field was fluctuating wildly now, sparks of uncontrolled energy cascading around her. She staggered slightly, and Jin instinctively moved to support her, catching himself just before making contact. "Lyra, are you all right?" She straightened with visible effort, pulling her field back into tighter control. "Yes, but we should leave quickly. The disruption will have been detected by any creatures sensitive to energy patterns." As if confirming her warning, a distant chiming sound echoed through the cavern, similar to the crystal predator they had encountered earlier, but multiplied and deeper in tone. Something larger was coming. They retraced their steps as rapidly as safety allowed, Jin cradling the precious containment unit while Lyra navigated, her field still unstable from the effort of disrupting the energy flow. The sounds of pursuit grew closer, crystal limbs scraping against crystal floors, harmonic vibrations that seemed to be communicating between multiple entities. They were nearing the exit from the deep cavern system when disaster struck. A particularly violent fluctuation in Lyra's energy field triggered a cascade reaction in the unstable crystal formations overhead. With a sound like breaking glass magnified 1,000 times, a section of the ceiling began to collapse. "Run!" Lyra shouted, pushing Jin ahead of her with a controlled pulse of her field, careful even now not to touch him directly. They sprinted for the exit passage, crystal shards falling around them like lethal rain. Jin made it through just as the worst of the collapse began, turning back to see Lyra still several meters behind, her path now blocked by a growing pile of crystal debris. "Lyra," he called, setting down the containment unit and moving back toward the collapsing section. Her energy field was visible through the falling debris, flaring with alarm and effort as she dodged the larger fragments. A massive crystal spear broke loose from the ceiling, heading directly for her. Without thinking, Jin lunged forward, using one of the tools to deflect the crystal shard. The impact sent him stumbling backward, but he remained on his feet. "There's a gap," he shouted, pointing to a narrow opening in the falling debris. "Now!" Lyra burst through the opening just as the entire passage collapsed behind her, her energy field wild and sparking with fear and exertion. They both retreated several meters from the now-sealed passage, breathing heavily as dust and smaller crystal fragments settled around them. "That was—" Jin started, then coughed as crystal dust filled his lungs. "Reckless," Lyra finished for him, her field still surging with alarmed pulses. "You could have been killed. The containment unit could have been damaged." You could have been killed, Jin countered, retrieving the containment unit and checking it for damage. The beacon wouldn't do me much good then. Lyra stared at him, her energy field gradually shifting from alarm to confusion. You risked yourself. For me, of course, Jin replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That's what people do. Not for me, Lyra said softly, her field dimming to a somber blue. Not ever. Before Jin could respond, the ominous chiming sound resumed. Closer now, and seeming to come from multiple directions. Their pursuers had found alternate routes. We need to move, Lyra urged, her momentary vulnerability replaced by practical focus. The upper passages should be safer. They continued their ascent through the crystal labyrinth, the sounds of pursuit fading as they reached more stable sections. Lyra's knowledge of the tunnels proved invaluable, allowing them to avoid dead ends and unstable areas. By the time they emerged into the relative safety of the mid-level caves, both were exhausted but intact. We should rest briefly, Lyra suggested, indicating a small chamber off the main passage. The crystal predators rarely venture this far up. Inside the chamber, Jin carefully set the containment unit on a stable surface and sat heavily on a crystal outcropping, wincing slightly. The encounter with the falling debris had left him with several minor cuts and bruises. Lyra noticed his discomfort. You're hurt. Just some scrapes, Jin dismissed, though he couldn't entirely hide a grimace as he shifted position. Nothing compared to crash landing. Without asking permission, Lyra retrieved a small amount of the healing gel from her supplies and offered it to him. This will help. As before, Jin accepted gratefully, applying the glowing substance to the worst of the cuts. The immediate relief was noticeable, a cooling sensation followed by gentle warmth as the gel began its work. Thank you, he said, looking up at her. Not just for this, for everything. Guiding me, helping with the crystal. I wouldn't have stood a chance alone. Lyra's field rippled with an emotion Jin was beginning to recognize as embarrassment or modesty. You would have tried, she observed. You are resilient. Stubborn, my mother would say, Jin replied with a small smile. Speaking of which, how far are we from your caves? I'd like to start working on the beacon as soon as possible. Not far. Another hour's journey, if we avoid the unstable sections. Lyra paused, her field shifting to a more serious pattern. But before we continue, the beacon, if it attracts those who pursue you, then I'll deal with that when it happens, Jin said firmly. I can't stay here forever, Lyra. No offense to your hospitality. None taken, she replied, her field showing a brief flicker of what might have been humor. But you should understand the risk. These Technocorp people, they sound dangerous. Jin sighed, running a hand through his dust-covered hair. They are, but they're also bureaucrats at heart. They follow rules, their own twisted version of them, but rules nonetheless. If a legitimate rescue vessel responds first, there are protocols that even Technocorp won't violate openly. Too much scrutiny. And if they find you first? Jin's expression hardened. Then I'll have to be creative. I've evaded them this long. Lyra studied him, her luminous eyes unreadable, but her field showing patterns of concern mixed with something like admiration. You live with significant danger, yet you seem accepting of it. What's the alternative? Jin asked with a shrug. Hide forever? Let them win? Some. Things are worth the risk. He looked at her directly. I think you understand that better than most. The observation struck a chord. Lyra's field fluctuated with recognition. He had seen, through her isolation, to the choice it represented. Not just exile, but a deliberate sacrifice to protect others from what she believed herself to be. After a brief rest, they resumed their journey, making steady progress through the upper cave networks. As they walked, Jin found himself watching Lyra's interactions with the crystal environment. The way formations seemed to respond to her presence, brightening or resonating as she passed. There was a harmony there that went beyond simple physical principles, suggesting a deeper connection between Lyra and this strange moon she called home. The crystals, he said, breaking a comfortable silence. They recognize you somehow, don't they? Lyra glanced back, surprised by the observation. Yes, she admitted. Luminans and the crystal entities of Xylos share certain frequency patterns. We believe our species may have evolved in similar energy environments, though separated by vast distances. So this place, it's not just a random exile location for you. It was chosen specifically. Yes, the council believed I might find more stability here, among environments that naturally harmonize with our energy patterns. Her field dimmed slightly. They were not entirely wrong. I have achieved better control here than I had on our homeworld. But complete mastery remains elusive. They had reached a section of tunnel that opened occasionally to the surface, allowing glimpses of the gas giant hanging in the sky, its swirling clouds now illuminated by the system's distant sun. The view was spectacular, but Jin noticed Lyra barely glanced at it. Perhaps after years of isolation, even such magnificence became ordinary. Have you ever considered leaving? He asked. There must be places in the galaxy where your abilities would be valued rather than feared. Lyra's field constricted tight against her body, a defensive gesture Jian had come to recognize. The Council's judgment was not without cause. My condition has caused harm. Leaving was my choice as much as theirs. But that was years ago. Jian persisted gently. You've clearly gained more control since then. And for what I've seen, your abilities are extraordinary, not just dangerous. You have seen me in relative calm, Lyra countered, her field showing flickers of painful memory. When truly stressed or emotional, the results can be catastrophic. She gestured to a jagged scar in the crystal wall nearby. That was from a particularly vivid nightmare. Imagine if there had been others nearby. Jian fell silent, respecting her obvious discomfort with the topic. Yet he couldn't help noticing that during their most dangerous moments in the deep caves, the encounter with the crystal predator, the ceiling collapse, Lyra had maintained enough control to avoid causing additional harm, despite her evident fear and stress. They reached Lyra's cave complex as the gas giant's light was beginning to fade, indicating the approach of another night cycle. The comparative comfort and security of the familiar surroundings was welcome after the dangers they had faced. We should begin work on the beacon immediately, Lyra said, leading the way to the workspace where Jian had left his salvaged equipment. The resonance crystal will need careful calibration to achieve maximum signal strength without burning out. Jian carefully removed the crystal from its containment unit, placing it on the workspace. Even in the relatively stable environment of Lyra's cave, the crystal pulsed with inner light, responding to the ambient energy fields. It's beautiful, he commented, examining the perfect geometric structure. Hard to believe something so delicate could boost our signal clear out of this system. Its structure allows it to amplify energy without degradation, Lyra explained, her field showing the calm, focus patterns Jian had come to associate with her scientific interests. But the interface with your technology will be challenging. Your systems are not designed for direct energy manipulation. That's where your expertise comes in, Jian said, spreading out his tools and the partially reconstructed beacon. I can handle the mechanical and electronic components, but I'll need your guidance on the energy configuration. They worked together seamlessly, falling into a natural rhythm that belied their short acquaintance. Jian's technical skills complemented Lyra's deep understanding of energy mechanics, each filling in gaps in the other's knowledge. Hours passed unnoticed as they focused on the intricate task of integrating the resonance crystal into the beacon systems. Occasionally, Lyra would demonstrate a particular energy configuration by carefully manipulating her own field near the crystal, causing it to respond with specific patterns of light and resonance. Jian watched in fascination, recording the frequencies and replicating them as best he could in the beacon's programming. You have remarkable control when you're focused like this, he observed during a brief pause in their work. It's almost like watching an artist. Lyra's field shimmered with surprise, then settled into a pattern Jian hadn't seen before, a gentle, steady glow that suggested pleasure or pride. Energy manipulation was my primary study before. Everything changed. It feels good to use those skills again. You miss it, Jian said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Lyra admitted, her field dimming slightly. The work. The purpose. She hesitated, then added softly, the connection with others. The simple admission of loneliness touched Jian deeply. Despite her obvious intelligence and abilities, Lyra had spent years in isolation, convinced of her own dangerousness, denied the most basic comfort of companionship. Well, he said, trying to keep his tone light, for what it's worth, I think you're doing pretty well at the connection part right now. I haven't felt a single dangerous zap yet. The attempt at humor worked. Lyra's field rippled with amusement, sending small, harmless sparks dancing across the crystal surfaces nearby. The day is not over, she replied, with what Jian would have sworn was a teasing tone. They returned to their work, but something had shifted subtly between them. A new ease, a tentative trust forming. By the time they finally completed the beacon, the cave was filled with the soft ambient light of another dawn cycle. There, Jian said, connecting the final components. If your calculations are correct, this should have enough power to reach the nearest trade routes or monitoring stations. If the crystal alignment holds, Lyra added, her field showing both hope and concern. The energy flow must remain stable through the transmission sequence. Jian ran a final diagnostic check, then looked up at Lyra. Ready to send our message into the void? She nodded, her field pulling in close as if bracing for disappointment. Ready. Jian activated the beacon. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the resonance crystal began to glow with increasing intensity, channeling energy into the transmission system. The beacon hummed to life, indicators showing a powerful signal radiating outward, cutting through the interference that had doomed Jian's original distress call. It's working, Jian exclaimed, checking the readings. Signal strength is far beyond what I'd hoped for. This should reach clear across the sector. Lyra's field bloomed with pleased blue-gold patterns. The crystal is performing optimally. The alignment is holding. They watched the beacon's operation for several minutes, making minor adjustments to ensure maximum efficiency and duration. When they were satisfied it would continue functioning properly, Jian sat back with a sigh of relief. Now we wait, he said. Could be hours, could be days before someone picks up the signal and decides to investigate. What will you do? Lyra asked, her field settling into a more subdued pattern. If rescue comes? The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Jian considered it carefully before answering. Continue running, I suppose. Find another cargo route, another identity. He looked around the crystal cave that had been his temporary sanctuary. Keep trying to stay one step ahead of Technocorp until I can find a way to expose what they're doing. Alone, Lyra observed softly. It's safer that way, Jian replied, echoing her own earlier justification for isolation. Fewer people to get hurt if they catch up to me. Lyra's field rippled with recognition of the parallel. And if they do catch you? Jin's expression hardened. They won't get what they want. I made sure of that. The data is secured in ways they can't access without my cooperation. They would try to force that cooperation. Probably, Jian admitted. Not a scenario I like to dwell on. They lapsed into silence, both contemplating futures filled with solitude and danger. Outside, the energy storms that had briefly abated were beginning to build again, casting strange patterns of light through the crystal walls of the cave. I should check the perimeter shields, Lyra said eventually, rising from her position near the beacon. The storms appear to be intensifying again. Jian nodded, remaining by the beacon to monitor its performance. As Lyra moved through the cave complex, reinforcing the energy barriers that protected her sanctuary, he found himself watching her with a growing sense of admiration and something more complex. A connection he hadn't anticipated forming in this strange, crystalline world. Hours passed as they settled into an uneasy waiting pattern. The beacon continued its steady transmission, while outside, the energy storms grew in intensity. Lyra's monitoring systems showed unusual patterns forming in the atmosphere, convergences of energy more powerful than any she had witnessed during her years of exile. Something's not right, she said, studying the readings with concern. These patterns, they're not natural. It's almost as if a sharp alert from one of her sensors interrupted her thought. Orbital disturbance detected. The system announced in a mechanical approximation of luminance speech. Vessel entering high atmosphere. Jian moved quickly to Lyra's side, examining the sensor readings. That was fast, he said, frowning. Too fast for a random passing ship to have picked up our signal and changed course. The energy signature is unusual, Lyra noted, her field constricting with tension. Very powerful engines. Military grade, perhaps. A cold certainty settled in Jian's stomach. Technocorp security vessels use modified military drives. They must have been closer than I thought. Maybe already searching this system. Could they have tracked your crash? Lyra asked, her field now showing clear concern. Possibly. Or they might have detected the energy surge when we activated the resonance crystal. Jian ran a hand through his hair, thinking rapidly. We need to shut down the beacon. Now. But even as he moved to deactivate the device, another alert sounded. This one more urgent. Multiple energy weapons signatures detected, the system announced. Targeting patterns identified. They're not here for rescue, Jian said grimly, powering down the beacon. They're here to make sure nothing leaves this moon, especially not me or the data I'm carrying. Lyra's field flared with protective anger, a vivid red pattern Jian hadn't seen before. They would destroy my home? They would consider it acceptable collateral damage, Jian confirmed, gathering his essential equipment. Technocorp doesn't leave loose ends. We need to move, find somewhere the energy storms might mask our presence. A tremendous concussion shook the cave system. The first salvos of energy weapons striking the moon's surface, targeting the origin of their beacon signal. Crystal formations shattered, sending dangerous shards flying through the air. Lyra instinctively expanded her energy field, creating a protective barrier that deflected the worst of the debris away from both of them. This way, she urged, leading Jian toward a deeper section of the cave network. There's a shielded chamber below that might withstand their bombardment. They moved quickly through the destabilizing tunnels, crystal dust filling the air as more impacts rocked the surface above. Lyra's energy field provided illumination as they descended, her control remarkably steady despite the crisis. I'm sorry, Jian said as they hurried through a particularly narrow passage. I've brought this destruction to your sanctuary. You did not fire those weapons, Lyra replied, her voice steady though her field showed turbulent emotions. The responsibility lies with those who choose violence. They reached the shielded chamber, a natural cavity reinforced with energy-dampening materials similar to those Lyra had used throughout her dwelling. The space was smaller than the main living areas but felt secure, isolated from the chaos above by layers of stable crystal formations. The Luminan mining operation used this as a safe room during energy storm emergencies, Lyra explained, activating additional shields. It should withstand considerable punishment. Jian set down his pack, checking that the data storage devices were intact. How long can we stay here? The life support systems are autonomous, Lyra said. We could survive for many cycles if necessary. But her field dimmed with concern. If they are determined to find you, they may deploy ground forces once the bombardment fails to achieve its purpose. Standard Technocorp procedure, Jian confirmed grimly. Hit hard from orbit, then send in recovery teams to confirm elimination of targets and retrieve any valuable assets. He patted the secure data storage. Like this. Another impact shuddered through the crystal structure around them, more distant now, but still powerful. The chamber's shields hummed in response, absorbing and dispersing the energy. Your technology, Lyra said suddenly, her field brightening with realization. The data you protect. What exactly does it contain? Jian hesitated, then decided complete honesty was necessary under the circumstances. It's research on directed energy manipulation at the cellular level. Originally designed for precision medical treatments, targeting cancer cells while leaving healthy tissue untouched, repairing neural damage, that sort of thing. And Technocorp weaponized it, Lyra concluded. Created a way to target specific biological systems from a distance. Exactly. Invisible, nearly untraceable, and devastating. Jin's expression was grim. Imagine a weapon that could target only individuals with specific genetic markers, or shut down particular neural functions without leaving evidence. The potential for assassination, covert operations, even genocide, against which conventional defenses would be useless, Lyra finished, her field showing patterns of deep concern. I understand why you chose to run. Another impact rattled the chamber, closer this time. The bombardment pattern was changing, becoming more systematic. A search grid rather than random destruction. They're being more precise, Jin noted, watching the sensor readings. They must have detected energy signatures from your systems. Or from me, Lyra added quietly. Her field pulsed with thoughtful energy. Your research, it involves energy manipulation similar to my natural abilities, doesn't it? That's why you weren't afraid of my energy field when we met. Jin looked at her with new understanding. I recognize the patterns, yes. Different scale, different source, but the fundamental principles are similar. He shook his head in wonder. The irony is, if I'd known beings like you existed, my research might have taken an entirely different direction. The bombardment continued, growing more intense around their location as Technocorp's targeting systems narrowed their search. The shielded chamber held, but the crystal structures above were being systematically destroyed. Lyra's home of many years being reduced to rubble. Lyra stood motionless, her energy field drawn in close as she monitored the destruction through her remaining sensor network. Jin could see the tension in her posture, the carefully controlled anger and grief in the patterns of her field. I'm so sorry, he said again, feeling helpless in the face of her loss. When Lyra finally turned to face him, her field had settled into a pattern of calm determination that surprised him. This place was never truly home, she said softly. It was a prison I accepted because I believed it necessary. Perhaps it is time to leave. Leave, Jin echoed, taken aback by the sudden shift. In the middle of an orbital bombardment. Not immediately, Lyra clarified, her field showing a flicker of what might have been wry humor. But your presence has reminded me of something I had forgotten. That isolation, while safe, is not living. Before Jin could respond, a new alert sounded from the remaining sensor network. Energy signatures consistent with planetary landing craft detected, the system announced. Estimated arrival at primary impact site in 30 minutes. Ground forces, Jin confirmed grimly. Right on schedule. Then we have 30 minutes to prepare, Lyra said, her field shifting to a focused, combat-ready configuration that Jin hadn't seen before. You said Technocorp follows rules. Their rules. What are they likely to send? Impressed by her tactical thinking, Jin quickly outlined what they might expect. Standard recovery team would be 6 to 8 operatives, heavily armed, with energy shields calibrated to standard weapon frequencies. They'll have scanners for biomass and data storage, and they'll be authorized for lethal force. Their shields, would they protect against unusual energy frequencies? Patterns they haven't encountered before? Jin caught her meaning immediately. Probably not. Corporate security relies on standardized equipment. They prepare for known threats, not someone like you. Lyra's field pulsed with something like satisfaction. Then we may have an advantage they do not expect. She moved to a storage area hidden within the chamber walls, retrieving what appeared to be specialized equipment. These were left by the Luminen miners, tools for emergency energy manipulation in unstable environments. You're suggesting we fight? Jin asked, watching as she assembled the equipment. I'm suggesting we survive, Lyra corrected, her field steady and determined. And perhaps do more than that. She looked at him directly, her luminous eyes intense. Your research could help beings like me, couldn't it? Help us understand and control our energy patterns. Theoretically, yes, Jin admitted. The principles could be adapted, but it would take time, resources, both of which require us to escape this moon, Lyra pointed out. With your data intact, Jin studied her with growing admiration. In the face of danger and loss, she wasn't retreating into fear or resignation, but thinking clearly, strategically. For someone who spent years hiding from her own abilities, you seem remarkably ready to use them. Lyra's field rippled with complex emotions, determination, fear, and something like liberation. Perhaps I needed a reason worth the risk. They spent the next 20 minutes in hurried preparation, Jin modifying his remaining equipment to work with Lyra's energy manipulation tools, while Lyra practiced precise control exercises, preparing herself for the confrontation to come. The landing craft have touched down, the sensor system announced eventually. Multiple humanoid signatures detected, moving toward main cave entrance. They'll secure the primary site first, then begin a systematic search, Jin predicted, checking his makeshift defenses. We have maybe 15 minutes before they locate this chamber. Lyra nodded, her field now a controlled, shimmering pattern of readiness. Then we should not be here when they arrive. She led Jin to what appeared to be a solid crystal wall at the back of the chamber, placing her hand against its surface. Her energy field extended into the crystal structure, resonating with a specific frequency that caused the seemingly solid wall to shift, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Emergency escape route, she explained. It leads to a small secondary cave system that isn't connected to the main network on any official mining charts. Clever, Jin commented, impressed once again by her foresight. Paranoid, Lyra corrected, with another flicker of that unexpected humor. But useful now. They slipped through the hidden passage, Lyra sealing it behind them to leave no obvious trace of their exit. The tunnel beyond was narrow and rough, clearly natural rather than carved, twisting upward through the crystal formations. This will bring us out approximately half a kilometer from the main cave entrance, Lyra explained as they climbed. From there, we should be able to observe their landing craft and perhaps create a diversion. The implications of her words weren't lost on Jin. You're suggesting we steal their ship. Do you have a better suggestion for leaving this moon? Jin grinned despite the danger. No, I don't. They emerged into the pale light of Xylos's day cycle, the gas giant hanging huge in the sky above. From their elevated position, they could see the Technocorp landing craft, a sleek, black vessel bristling with weapons, positioned near the shattered entrance to Lyra's former home. Armored figures moved systematically through the debris, disappearing into the cave network. 6 operatives, Jin counted, noting their positions. Heavy combat gear, standard issue. The ship appears to be on automated security. We'll need to override its systems to launch. Can you do that? Lyra asked, her field constricted tight against her body to avoid detection by any energy sensors. With the right distraction, yes, Jin confirmed. Their security protocols are good, but I helped design some of their earlier systems. There are backdoors. Lyra studied the situation, her field showing calm calculation. The energy storms are building again, she noted, gesturing to the darkening sky where energy discharges were becoming visible. If I could amplify a specific pattern, direct it toward their position, a natural disaster rather than a direct attack, Jin finished, understanding immediately. They'd have to abandon the search, return to the ship. Where you would be waiting, Lyra confirmed. The plan was risky, depending on precise timing and Lyra's ability to manipulate environmental energy on a scale she had previously avoided. But as the Technocorp operatives methodically destroyed what remained of her sanctuary in their search, Jin could sense her resolve hardening. I'll need to reach that formation, Lyra said, indicating a tall crystal spire that rose from the broken landscape about 100 meters away. It's a natural energy conduit. I can use it to channel the storm's power. I'll circle around to approach the ship from the blind side, Jin said, checking his equipment one last time. Wait for your signal before moving in. They exchanged a long look, both aware of the dangers they were about to face. Lyra's field rippled with an emotion Jin couldn't quite identify, concern, determination, and something deeper. Be careful, she said softly. You too, Jin replied. And Lyra, Thank you for everything. Her field pulsed once with brilliant gold light, a gesture he somehow understood as both acknowledgement and promise. Then they separated, each moving toward their designated position with careful stealth. Jin worked his way through the crystal debris field, keeping low and using the irregular terrain for cover. From his new vantage point, he could see the Technocorp operatives emerging from the cave entrance, apparently having found a shielded chamber and discovered their quarry missing. Their leader was gesturing sharply, deploying the team in a search pattern that would eventually cover the surrounding area. Time was running out. He looked toward the crystal spire where Lyra had positioned herself, now barely visible against the darkening sky as the energy storm built in intensity overhead. For a moment, he feared the plan had failed. Then he saw it. A single thread of energy, distinctive in its pattern and color, stretching from the crystal spire toward the churning storm clouds. Lyra was establishing a connection, creating a channel for the storm's power. The thread brightened, widened, becoming a visible conduit of controlled energy. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The storm clouds directly above the Technocore position began to swirl with increasing violence, energy discharges forking downward with unnatural precision. The operatives noticed too late. The first massive energy bolt struck near their position, shattering crystal formations and sending dangerous shards flying in all directions. The team leader shouted orders, gesturing urgently toward the ship as more energy bolts struck, creating a barrier of destruction between the operatives and the cave network. They had no choice but to retreat, running for the safety of their vessel as the targeted storm intensified. Jin seized his opportunity, sprinting toward the ship from his concealed position. He reached the access panel just as the first operatives arrived at the opposite side of the craft, pounding on the main hatch for emergency entry. Working quickly, Jin connected his modified scanner to the ship's external diagnostic port, uploading the bypass codes he'd prepared. The security system resisted briefly, then yielded as his old backdoor protocols took effect. A maintenance hatch on the underside of the vessel unlocked with a soft click. Jin slipped inside, just as the main hatch opened to admit the retreating operatives. He sealed the maintenance access behind him and moved swiftly through the narrow service corridor to the ship's control center, listening to the chaos of shouted orders and the thunder of the manipulated storm outside. The bridge was empty. Standard procedure would have all hands assisting with emergency evacuation. Jin slid into the pilot's seat, overriding the automated systems and initiating launch preparations. The engines hummed to life beneath him, power building quickly. A warning alarm sounded throughout the ship. Unauthorized access detected, the system announced. Security protocols engaged. Jin worked faster, fingers flying across the control interfaces as he disabled alarm systems and locked out secondary command functions. He needed just a few more seconds to secure full control. The bridge doors slid open. Jin turned to find himself facing the Technocorp team leader, energy weapon raised and aimed directly at his head. "Step away from the controls, Jin," the armored figure ordered, voice distorted by the combat helmet but tone unmistakably deadly. "You've led us on quite a chase, but it ends here." Jin raised his hand slowly, mind racing for options. "Captain Vex, still doing the corporation's dirty work, I see. Still paying better than honest work." The leader, Vex, replied coldly. "Now move away before I decide the data in your head isn't worth preserving along with whatever you've got stored in those devices." The ship shuddered as another energy bolt struck nearby, rocking it on its landing struts. Outside, the storm had reached catastrophic intensity, the manipulated energy patterns creating destruction far beyond normal parameters. "Your team won't survive out there much longer," Jin said, not moving from the controls. "The storm's getting worse, which is why we're leaving. Now." Vex gestured with the weapon. "Last warning." A sudden, blinding flash of light flooded the bridge as an energy bolt struck the ship directly. But instead of causing damage, the energy seemed to flow around the vessel's hull, contained and redirected. The interior lights flickered, then stabilized. Standing in the doorway behind Vex was Lyra, Her energy field expanded to its full extent, vibrant with power and purpose. She had channeled the storm's energy through herself, using it to access the ship without triggering its external defenses. Vex spun to face the new threat, weapon swinging toward Lyra, but he was too slow. With a gesture that spoke of years of suppressed potential finally unleashed, Lyra directed a precise pulse of energy that struck the weapon, overloading its power cells and forcing Vex to drop it with a cry of pain. "Now, Jien," Lyra called, maintaining her position in the doorway, her field creating a barrier that prevented Vex from either retreating or attacking. Jien turned back to the controls, completing the launch sequence with practice speed. The ship's engines roared to full power, lifting the vessel from the surface, even as the remaining Technocorp operatives outside scrambled for holds or were left behind. "Secure him," Jin called over his shoulder, focusing on navigating through the energy storm that still raged around them. Lyra moved fully into the bridge, her field confining Vex against the wall, its energy patterns disrupting his armor systems and rendering him temporarily immobile. The captain struggled uselessly, his face visible now as his helmet systems failed, revealing features contorted with fury and disbelief. "What are you?" he demanded, staring at Lyra's luminescent form and the energy field that held him effortlessly in place. Lyra didn't answer, her attention divided between maintaining control of her field and watching Jien pilot the ship higher into the atmosphere. The vessel shuddered as it fought against the storm's violence, but Jien's skilled hands kept them steady, pushing through to clearer space above. As they broke free of the worst of the storm, Lyra secured Vex in a storage compartment, sealing it with an energy lock he couldn't override. She returned to the bridge to find Jien setting a course away from Xylos, the gas giant falling away behind them as the ship accelerated to interplanetary speeds. "We did it," Jien said, leaning back in the pilot seat with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. "We actually did it." Lyra moved to stand beside him, her field gradually settling into a calmer pattern as the immediate danger passed. Together they watched through the view screen as Xylos, her prison and sanctuary for so many years, diminished into the distance. "Where will we go?" she asked quietly, her field showing uncertainty beneath its current stability. Jien considered the question seriously. There are independent colonies in the outer reaches, places where Technocorp's influence is limited. We could find allies there, people who would understand the importance of the data I'm carrying. He glanced at her, suddenly uncertain. "That is, if you want to come with me. I understand if you'd rather find your own way." Lyra's field shifted through complex patterns of emotion, uncertainty, hope, fear, and something warmer that pulsed gold at its edges. "I've been alone for a very long time," she said softly. "I am not sure I remember how to be otherwise." "Neither do I, honestly," Jin admitted. "I've spent years keeping everyone at a distance, afraid that anyone too close would become a target." He looked at her directly. "But I think maybe we could figure it out together, if you wanted to try." Before Lyra could respond, the ship's alert system chimed. "Multiple vessels detected entering system," the automated voice announced. "Configuration consistent with Technocorp patrol craft." "They had a backup plan," Jin muttered, turning to the controls and pushing the ship's engines harder. "Of course they did." Lyra moved to the co-pilot's position, studying the sensor displays with quick comprehension. 4 ships, converging pattern. They're trying to cut off our escape routes. Standard containment procedure, Jien confirmed, plotting possible trajectories. "This vessel has good speed, but we're outnumbered and they'll have the system's navigation hazards mapped more thoroughly than our stolen databases." "The energy storms," Lyra said suddenly, her field brightening with realization. "They're not just on Xylos. The entire system is prone to energy flares from the gas giant's radiation belt. If we could navigate through them while they cannot." Jien caught her meaning immediately. "You could sense the energy patterns, predict the discharges before they happen." He grinned, "Like navigating through a lightning storm with a living lightning rod." "An apt metaphor," Lyra replied, her field showing a flicker of what Jien was now certain was her version of humor. though I prefer to think of it as harmonic resonance prediction. Whatever you call it, it might be our only advantage. Jin adjusted their course, heading toward the radiation belt that stretched between Xylos and its neighboring moons. Ready to try? Lyra's field settled into a focused, determined pattern. Yes. What followed was the most extraordinary display of piloting and energy navigation Jin had ever experienced. As he guided the ship through the treacherous radiation belt, Lyra extended her awareness, sensing energy buildups and discharge patterns seconds before they occurred. Her field would pulse in the direction of danger, giving Jin just enough warning to adjust their course, sometimes with mere meters to spare as massive energy bolts lashed through space around them. The pursuing Technocorp vessels attempted to follow, but lacked their unique advantage. One by one, they either fell back or suffered damaging hits from the unpredictable energy discharges. Through the rear sensors, Jin and Lyra watched as the corporate ships disappeared from their detection range, either retreating or disabled. "I think we've lost them," Jin said finally, as they emerged from the radiation belt into clearer space. The ship had taken some damage, minor systems flickering, hull integrity reduced, but stable, but they were intact and free. Lyra's energy field dimmed with exhaustion, pulling close to her body as she released the intense concentration she had maintained. "It worked," she said softly, a note of wonder in her voice. "We escaped." Jin set the ship on an automated course away from the system, then turned to face her. "Fully. We did more than escape. We succeeded where they thought we would fail." He reached out, stopping just short of touching her field. "You were amazing back there." Lyra looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face, open, admiring, without a trace of the fear she had expected to see for so many years. Her field rippled with emotion, expanding slightly toward his hand without quite making contact. "Everyone's afraid of me," she said quietly, voicing the belief that had defined her existence for so long. Sooner or later, Jin simply smiled, a gentle, understanding expression that reached his eyes. "Not everyone," he replied, holding her gaze steadily. Something shifted in Lyra's field, a tension releasing, a pattern changing. The constant fear of rejection that had kept her isolated for so many years met Jin's smile and found no purchase, no confirmation of its truth. In its place, a tentative hope began to form. "What happens now?" she asked, her field showing vulnerability she would never have revealed days earlier. "Now, we have choices," Jin replied. "Real ones, not just survival options." He leaned back in his seat, considering their position. "We have a ship, evidence against one of the most powerful corporations in the galaxy, and abilities they never anticipated. We could disappear into the outer colonies, or we could try to do something more with what we know. More. Your abilities, combined with my research, we could help others like you. Maybe even find a way to make Technocorp answer for what they've done." Jin's expression grew serious. "It will be dangerous. They won't stop looking for us." "Danger is not new to me," Lyra pointed out, her field steadying into a more confident pattern. "And purpose. Purpose would be worth the risk." The ship continued its journey away from Xylos, leaving behind the crystalline moon that had been both prison and sanctuary. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the unknown, but also possibility, connection, and a future neither of them had dared imagine. Jin plotted a course for the distant outer colonies, where independent spirits and those seeking to escape corporate control had established communities beyond the reach of entities like Technocorp. Beside him, Lyra watched the stars with new eyes, her energy field a calm, steady glow that reflected her inner state, no longer chaotic with suppressed fear, but harmonized with cautious hope. As the ship's engines settled into the rhythms of long-distance space travel, Jin found himself studying his unexpected companion. "You know," he said conversationally, "most people would consider this a terrible situation. Stolen ship, corporate pursuers, uncertain destination. Most people have not spent 12 cycles alone on a crystal moon," Lyra replied, her field showing that spark of humor again. "Perspective is relative." Jin laughed, the sound filling the bridge with unexpected warmth. After a moment, Lyra's field pulsed with answering amusement, a harmony of light and sound that somehow made the stolen corporate vessel feel more like home than either of them had experienced in years. To new perspectives, then, Jin said, gesturing toward the vast starfield visible through the view screen. And wherever they might lead us. Lyra's field extended slightly, not quite touching him, but closer than she had allowed herself before. To new perspectives, she agreed softly, and to not being afraid. In the quiet of the bridge, surrounded by the endless possibilities of space, Lyra and Jin shared a moment of perfect understanding. Two beings who had found in each other not just allies against a common enemy, but mirrors of their own isolation and beacons toward a different future. Whatever challenges awaited them among the stars, they would face them neither alone nor afraid, but together, the alien girl whose emotions manifested as visible energy, and the human who had simply smiled when others would have run. The ship accelerated toward the outer reaches of the system, carrying them away from their pasts and toward a future neither could predict, but both had chosen. Behind them, the crystal moon of Xylos diminished to a distant point of light, no longer a place of exile, but the beginning of a journey neither had expected to take. Ahead, the stars beckoned with infinite possibility. Aboard the stolen ship, in the quiet hours of their escape, Lyra found herself drawn to the observation deck. The vast panorama of stars stretched before her, unfiltered by Xylos's atmosphere or the crystalline walls of her former home. She stood transfixed. Her energy field expanded in wonder at the sheer magnitude of possibility that had opened before her. "It's something, isn't it?" Jin's voice came from behind her. He had changed from his damaged environmental suit into clothing found aboard the ship, looking more comfortable but still weary from their ordeal. "Yes," Lyra agreed simply, not turning from the view. "I had forgotten how vast it is." Jin moved to stand beside her, careful as always to maintain the distance her field required. "How long were you on Xylos?" 12 cycles by the gas giant's orbit, Lyra replied. "Approximately 16 standard years. That's a long time to be alone." Lyra's field rippled with acknowledgement. "The council believed isolation was necessary until I achieved control. They would check periodically through automated communications." Her field dimmed slightly. The reports were always the same. Progress insufficient, containment recommended. "They were wrong," Jin said quietly. "Well, I've seen from you, especially during our escape. That's not someone who lacks control. That's someone who understands their abilities and can use them with precision when it matters." Lyra turned to face him, her luminous eyes studying his expression for any sign of deception or placation. She found none. "You truly believe that," she said, her field shifting to a pattern of cautious hope. "Ido." Jin gestured to the ship around them. "None of this would have been possible otherwise. You saved both our lives multiple times with your abilities. That's not the action of someone who's dangerous to others, at least, not to those who don't deserve it." Lyra's field pulsed with a complex emotion, gratitude mixed with lingering doubt. "The incident that led to my exile. It was not intentional, but it was devastating. 3 elders were critically injured. A section of our floating city was destroyed. I was young, unprepared for the stress of the initiation ceremony, and my field reacted." "How old were you?" Jin asked gently. "By human standards, perhaps the equivalent of 16. Lyra's field constricted with a painful memory. "Old enough to be held responsible. And instead of helping you learn control, they isolated you completely." Jin couldn't keep the disapproval from his voice. "Left a teenager alone for 16 years. It was considered merciful," Lyra explained. "The alternative was permanent suppression of my energy field, a procedure that would have essentially erased my true nature." Jin's expression hardened. "That's not mercy. That's fear-based cruelty disguised as protection." He shook his head. "From what I've seen, you didn't need isolation. You needed guidance, support, understanding." The simple truth of his words resonated through Lyra's field, creating ripples of realization. Had the council been wrong? Had her exile been unnecessary? The possibility was both liberating and painful. So many years lost to solitude that might have been spent learning and growing among others. "What about you?" she asked, wanting to shift focus from her own painful history. "You said you've kept people at a distance to protect them. For how long?" Jian sighed, turning back to the starfield. 3 years since I left Technocorp. Before that, well, the work didn't leave much room for personal connections either. I was always the next big project guy, living in the lab more than anywhere else. "You believed in what you were creating," Lyra observed, reading the passion in his voice. "I did. Energy-directed cellular modification could revolutionize medicine, eliminate suffering for millions." His expression darkened. Instead, they turned it into a weapon that could cause suffering on an unprecedented scale. Targeted bioweapons with no trace, no defense. "And now you carry the evidence," Lyra noted, her field showing understanding. "A dangerous position. Worth it if I can get the data to the right people." Jian ran a hand through his hair. A gesture Lyra had noticed indicated stress or deep thought. "There's an independent scientific collective in the Eridani system. Researchers who left corporate and governmental oversight to pursue ethical applications of advanced technology. If anyone can help expose Technocorp and protect this research, it's them. Is that our destination?" Jian nodded. "If you're still willing to come with me. It's not exactly the safest journey." Lyra's field shifted to a steady, determined blue. "I spent 16 years in safety. It was insufficient." The simple statement brought a smile to Jian's face. "Well, when you put it that way." He gestured toward the bridge. "I should check our course. The ship's automated systems are good, but I don't entirely trust corporate navigation programming." "I will join you," Lyra said, falling in a step beside him. The energy patterns of the drive system are interesting. As they worked together on the bridge, recalibrating systems and plotting the safest route to the distant Eridani system, a comfortable rhythm developed between them. Jian's technical knowledge complemented Lyra's intuitive understanding of energy patterns, creating a synergy neither had experienced before. Hours passed unnoticed as they focused on the task of outrunning their pursuers and reaching potential allies. When they finally took a break, Jian found himself studying Lyra with renewed curiosity. "Can I ask you something about your energy field? Something I've been wondering since we met." Lyra looked up from the sensor display she'd been monitoring. "You may ask. The colors, the patterns, they change with your emotions, right? What does each one mean?" Lyra seemed surprised by the question, her field rippling with something like self-consciousness. "It is personal, like asking what each expression on your face signifies." "I'm sorry," Jian said quickly. "I didn't mean to pry." "No, it's—" Lyra's field stabilized into a thoughtful blue-green. "It is not offensive, simply unexpected. No one has ever asked before." She considered a moment longer, then continued. "Blue indicates calm or focus. Red is anger or alarm. Gold appears with positive emotions, pleasure, pride, happiness. Violet relates to sadness or regret." "And right now?" Jian asked, gesturing to her current field pattern. "Thoughtfulness, curiosity." Lyra studied him with her luminous eyes. "Why do you ask?" Jian shrugged, slightly embarrassed. "I've been trying to understand better. It's like learning a new language, I guess. Want to understand what you're communicating." The simple honesty of his answer caused Lyra's field to pulse briefly with warm gold. A reaction she couldn't hide and didn't try to. "That is considerate." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's security system. "Proximity warning," the automated voice announced. "Unidentified vessel detected at extreme sensor range." Jian moved quickly to the tactical display, checking the readings. "Configuration doesn't match Technocorp," he said after a moment. "Looks like a long-range trading vessel or possibly an independent scout." "Friend or foe?" Lyra asked, joining him at the display. "Unknown, but they haven't changed course to intercept us, which is promising." Jian considered their options. "We could alter course to avoid them completely, but that would add time to our journey and potentially burn more fuel than we can afford to waste." "Or," Lyra prompted, sensing his hesitation, or we continue as planned and prepare to deal with them if necessary. Jian grimaced. This ship is armed, standard Technocorp security package, but I'd rather not start a confrontation if we can avoid it. Lyra studied the sensor readings, her field showing focus concentration. The vessel's energy signature is unusual, not standard propulsion. She looked up at Jian. There is something familiar about the pattern. It reminds me of Luminen configurations, though modified. Luminen? Jian's eyebrows rose in surprise. Out here? I thought your people rarely ventured beyond their own systems. Officially, yes, Lyra agreed. But there have always been explorers. Those who believe isolation is not the answer to the galaxy's complexities. A new possibility dawned on Jian. Could they be allies? Other exiles, perhaps. It is possible, Lyra admitted, her field showing cautious hope. Though I would not assume friendship based solely on origin. The unidentified vessel continued on its course, giving no indication it had detected them or had any interest in their presence. After careful deliberation, Jian decided to maintain their current trajectory but increase passive scanning, wanting more information before making any moves that might draw attention. Hours passed without incident, the mysterious ship eventually disappearing from their sensor range without ever changing course or showing interest in their presence. Whether it had been potential ally, random traveler, or something else entirely remained unknown. One more mystery in the vast expanse of space. The incident served as a reminder of their vulnerability. A stolen corporate vessel carrying two fugitives through largely uncharted regions. Despite the sophisticated technology at their disposal, they were essentially alone in their journey, dependent on each other's skills and resilience. As Jian configured the ship systems for night cycle, dimming lights, and activating automated monitoring protocols, he found himself reflecting on how quickly his circumstances had changed. Days ago, he had been a solitary runaway, crash-landed on a hostile moon with little hope of escape. Now he was navigating a corporate security vessel toward distant allies, accompanied by perhaps the most extraordinary being he had ever encountered. "You should rest," Lyra observed, noting his evident fatigue. "I can monitor the systems while you sleep." "Do you need sleep?" Jian asked, realizing he knew little about her physiological requirements. "Not as humans do," Lyra explained. "My species requires regenerative cycles, but they are shorter and can be postponed when necessary." Her field rippled with what might have been concern. You, however, are showing clear signs of exhaustion. Jian couldn't argue with her. Assessment, the adrenaline that had carried him through their escape had long since worn off, leaving bone-deep weariness in its wake. "Wake me if anything changes?" he asked, already moving toward the crew quarters they had identified earlier. "Of course," Lyra promised, her field pulsing with reassurance. Alone on the bridge, Lyra settled into a meditative state, extending her awareness to encompass the ship's energy systems. The vessel hummed around her, its mechanical rhythms so different from the crystalline harmonies of Xylos, yet fascinating in their own way. She could sense the power flowing through conduits, the controlled reactions of the propulsion system, the subtle fluctuations of life support adjusting to maintain optimal conditions. For the first time in many years, Lyra allowed herself to contemplate a future beyond mere survival. A future that might include purpose, discovery, and perhaps even connection. The humans sleeping in the quarters nearby had shown her something she had forgotten was possible: acceptance without fear. That simple gift had changed everything. Her field expanded slightly in the darkness of the bridge, its patterns reflecting not the anxiety and constraint of recent years, but something newer and more hopeful: the first tentative patterns of freedom. In the crew quarters, Jian dreamed of crystal caverns and luminous beings, of danger escaped and journeys beginning. Even in sleep, part of him remained alert to their precarious situation. Fugitives in a stolen ship, pursued by powerful enemies. But beneath that vigilance ran a current of unexpected optimism. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. The alien girl who had been told her whole life she was too dangerous to be near others, and a human who had simply smiled when others would have run. The ship carried them onward through the vastness of space, two unlikely allies bound by circumstance and choice, heading toward an uncertain future that, for the first time in years, held promise rather than mere persistence. And that, perhaps, was the most unexpected discovery of all.